Alrighty. Welcome, everybody. This is Vikas from InstaWP, and welcome to today's webinar. This is particularly exciting for me, and I hope a lot of folks watching us. And first of all, we'll do our ritual where we always welcome our guests. So we have Carlos, Paresh, Eric, Javier, Luis, Ajit, Frank from Denmark, Matej, Spunia, Gio, Kevin, Ludwig, Gideon, Rennie, Miguel, Mike. Welcome everybody. And Toli, and from all over the world. Steph from Chicago, Bud, Adrian from Spain, Jacob from Ohio. This is a chance for you to say hi. Nicoleta, yes, the stream will be available online in our YouTube channel. So under the live tab, you can see it even if we are done, when we are done. Hey JP, hey Mohammed, hey everybody from Gaby from Austria, Slivin from France. Welcome. Today we have an exciting topic, which is AI and WordPress. And we have two very, very exciting guests. They have kindly accepted our invitation to come online and show you how they have used AI in their workflows. And and I think we'll just wait for 30 more seconds for more people to join. Hey Alejandro, thank you, man. Thank you. Appreciate it. Ramjeet from Rajasthan, India. Anthony from New York City. We have already 120 people watching us right now, and we hope to cross our previous record, which was 250 watches. Today we are targeting 400 plus watches. So counting on you folks for your kind time. And again, thanks for your time today. And let's get started. In this webinar, we are going to talk about why is AI or how is AI transforming WordPress plugin development or development in general in WordPress. So first, I would like to invite Brian on the stage. Brian is a developer advocate at WooCommerce. He's a WordPress developer, writer, instructor, and host of the podcast called webmasters.fm. You should definitely check it out. You can also find his writing on industry publications such as Tavern, The Tavern, Master WP, the WP Minute, and his personal blog, which I've been following, to be honest with you. And you should definitely give him a follow on X or slash Twitter. So let's welcome Brian on the stage. Hey, Brian.
Hey, thanks for having me today.
Man, really appreciate your time today. It was a short notice, I know. But really, really excited to have you on this webinar. We have an exciting demo from you today. Yes?
Yes, definitely. We'll see how it goes with AI. You never know. AI likes to think, has a mind of its own.
Has a mind of its own, and then does its own thing whenever AI wants. So we are stuck with us. Let me just change the background a little bit so that it's not so moving. Or maybe this one was better. Yeah. Alrighty. So next up, let's welcome Nick. So Nick is a developer relations advocate at Automattic. He has over 12 years of experience in the WordPress community and has served on the release team for several major WordPress versions, including 6.0 to 6.3. And he has built numerous open source plugins. You might know him also from the famous block plugins, which is the icon block and the block visibility. And there was a very big news item when Nick merged the Icon Block Pro version into the free version and made it completely free. Both of these plugins combined have more than 60,000 users. So let's welcome Nick on the stage. Hey, Nick.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. As I said to Nick, to Brian as well, both of you kindly accepted our invitation to come on board and do this webinar together, and really appreciate both of your times today. We booked for 60 minutes, but I'm 100% sure that we are going to go over that. So I hope you guys have a little bit more extra time on your calendar today. And so let's get started. I think we have a lot of comments coming in. Max is also here. Hey, Max. And a lot of folks. Thanks again for everybody joining in from everywhere. Okay, so before we begin, right? So the agenda for today. Agenda is such a traditional word, but the lineup for today is that we'll just discuss what is the role of AI in the WordPress development, and then both of you have a very exciting demo lined up for us today, and we'll go into the demo one by one and see what we can learn from your workflows. Of course, this is a new field and we are all learning together. So anything AI does badly, we'll just blame it on AI.
Yep.
All right. So this question is for Brian or Nick. You can also pitch in. So what is basically AI's changing role in the WordPress ecosystem right now, which you see? Focused on the development part.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's making some big changes in terms of how fast you can get plugins up and running, and how, for a lot of people that are more technical, they might have in the past gone to Google and said, I need a plugin that does this. And they find a plugin that gets them, 80% of what they want, but not that final 20%. But now I know a lot of people are going straight to ChatGPT and they're saying, I mean, I've had in the past clients who've done this where they just ask ChatGPT, write me some WordPress code. It does it. It spits them out. They paste it in somewhere in WordPress and they skip the plugin directory automatically. So I think it's definitely going to change how people are going to modify their WordPress sites, how people are going to add functionality, and whether we'll see, I don't think we'll see a slowdown. In fact, I've heard there's a big increase in plugins being submitted to the repository. They're just a lot more written with AI. But we're definitely going to see probably more code written a lot faster and a lot more unique examples of code that are one purpose, single use plugins.
So I was just actually about to ask that. Means if people are able to solve their needs through AI, why download a plugin from the repo? But I think you answered it already, that you are seeing an uptick of more plugins. And we are all seeing that. Because one-shot single-use plugin is a different use case, but like having a farm builder or a page builder is entirely different thing, right?
Yeah, and there's certain things that you don't want to trust to AI. I don't want to trust anything that makes me money. I don't want to trust it for my transactions and my Stripe integration. I'm going to go use WooCommerce for that. I don't want to trust it for forms probably because I don't want to lose my leads. I don't want to lose any potential business. So there's definitely places where you're going to use the trusty, reliable, maintained plugin with a person that you can, send a support ticket to if you have a problem with. But for smaller customizations, little differences you want to make to your site, I think we're going to see a lot more AI.
Nick, how about yourself? Means you have been in the WordPress industry for a long time. Pre-AI era and now with the AI, can you live without it?
Can I live without it? Probably not. I think that it's speeding up development to an incredible level. I think I'm always very cautious when we talk about like vibe coding and people just building things from scratch without any sort of background in WordPress development. So I think that that's going to be a bit challenging. But I think if you already are a WordPress developer, using AI to speed up your workflows is just incredible. I look at the plugins that I've built that took hundreds of hours. Today, they'd probably take a small fraction of that. Just all the busy work, writing documentation and, inline code and just, things that you don't want to do as a human. But I do think I want to touch on Brian's comment about one-off plugins. I did this myself. I recently redid my website and I have a bunch of plugins that are bespoke. They're built exactly the way I want them. They're not novel. One's like a syntax highlighter for code and, some other small things, but it's exactly the way I wanted it. I could have picked a plugin off the repository, but I did it exactly the way I wanted it using AI. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that, but it's not going to we're not going to get a AI built WooCommerce or anything like that anytime soon, right? So there's still plenty of room for plugin developers to have a space.
But extension for things like WooCommerce is the thing, right?
Yeah.
Which I think Brian is going to demo today.
Absolutely.
And same what you are going to demo today is like blocks on already built software of Gutenberg or block editor. So that means that you can not only build WordPress plugins, you can also build extensions of these niche use cases, which are like maybe Elementor add-on or whatever add-ons you want to build. So that's really cool. Next up, Ms. Do you guys remember, Ms. when going into the AI world, a lot of people are excited. I want to keep them holding to their horses for a moment. But do you guys remember when did you build your first plugin and how was that experience like, Brian?
Before AI, my first
I mean,
ever
yeah,
WordPress
your
plugin.
first ever, yeah.
Yeah. I think I was probably 10 years ago, I was building sites with Beaver Builder was kind of the page builder of choice. And they had a really great way where you could build, what we would call custom blocks in WordPress. You could build your custom Beaver Builder modules. And that I would do that a lot for clients. And I remember taking all the ones that I had built for Beaver Builder and putting them in a plugin and going through that whole process and stuff. And it was painstaking. I was a very good developer at the time. So it was painstaking trying to figure all this stuff out. And I could easily imagine that if I did that now, it would have probably been, 20 minutes of work versus, hours over multiple days. But yeah, Beaver Builder custom modules, I remember, was my first kind of full feature plugin.
Self-taught developer?
I am my background was, I was actually an English teacher before I was in WordPress. So my background is all over the place. Yeah. So, but yeah, self-taught developer, started as a freelancer. Like most, I think, people in WordPress, a lot of people in WordPress, they teach themselves, they do it themselves, they level up over time. Okay. So yeah.
Nick, how about you? Do you remember your first plugin?
Yeah. So I was a pretty big Genesis framework user back in the day. And so my very first plugin was, I think it still exists and has 10,000 users. It's Genesis Featured Page Advanced. It took a Genesis widget and then added more functionality to it. But yeah, that was a big step. I remember that, launching that, and my first plugin in the repository, and getting users, and yeah, it was an exciting time. That was probably 12 years ago. So it's been a journey.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, guys. Now, without further ado, I think a lot of people are expecting demos from us. Obviously, as much as we would like to hear from you for your journey and things into WordPress, but shall we just switch gears and get into live demos? Before we start the demos, Brian, would you like to talk about what is your tech stack in terms of AI? So in terms of WordPress, we know you have PHP, WordPress framework, and then others, usual suspects. But in terms of AI, what is your used to workflow?
Yeah, it's funny because the AI tools are changing constantly. I had originally started with Copilot, GitHub Copilot in VS Code, and I was very happy with it. People talked about Cursor. I didn't see a need for it. And then I tried it, and that was like a level up. And then, so I've been sticking with Cursor as a code because I like to code locally and I just like to do it on my machine. So I use Cursor, which feels like a normal code editor, but just has a little bit deeper of that AI integration. And then actually to prepare for this demo, for the first time ever, I tried Grok, which is Twitter's AI that you get in Twitter if you have Twitter. And people were telling me it's really good. So when in preparing, I chatted with Grok to get some ideas of different demos and everything. And it was actually really good. I was surprised. If you haven't tried Grok, I would say it was like on par with.
So was the Grok inside Cursor as a model, or like a
no? This one was it's in Twitter. You just log into your. I think I have a premium Twitter or something, but I log in and it says
so
Grok
is inside Twitter and as a standalone app as well, but it is not embedded into Cursor yet.
No, so I use that for brainstorming, getting ideas, talking through stuff, and then all the coding and everything. I use Cursor. They have a chat mode and an agent mode, and I like to go back and forth.
Someone says, Brian says, or other Brian, you will not use any of the Elon's product. So yeah, that's this. Yeah. So Cursor as an IDE chatbot for Grok, and inside Cursor, what model do you use?
Oh, I don't know. What's their default right now? Is it 7 or is it
I think
3.5 or
Sonnet
3.7?
3.7 now.
Yeah. I leave it on default. I'm not like a huge model nerd. Everybody knows all the differences between the models, and I'm just I'm still so impressed with the defaults of everything that I haven't even tried out different models and stuff. I've heard 3.7 is good, but a little bit more wild. That's what I hear.
Almost every model nowadays is like plateaued to a point that they are all very good, right? So
Yeah.
all right, so let's get into it. Brian, I will push your screen um, into the stage. If you can kindly share it. Cursor is great given the fork of VS Code, so I can easily jump between it and VS Code. Yes. And you can also use a lot of extensions, which is available for VS Code into Cursor. I think there is an open VSX project where you can download these extensions from. And most of the extensions work out of the box anyway. Even InstaWP has an extension for VS Code to remotely edit files. So that also works with Cursor. All right. So over to you, Brian, pushing to you.
Okay.
Yeah. So folks who are watching us online, you can feel free to maximize your screen or go full screen so that you can see the itty-bitties of the details. Yeah. Brian, over to you.
All right. So let me know if you need me to zoom in on anything, but I have really just a standard local WooCommerce shop with all the default products. This is if you just want to mess around with WooCommerce, you can kind of one click install all these default products. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a little banner that just sticks on top of any product that's in our music category. So there's like a little album here. I think there's like a CD lower on, but I just want to say, all right, throw a banner on top of all of these that says, top seller. This is my exciting top seller category of products right now. This is the kind of stuff where I think people could muck around in settings and plugins and stuff, but you might see this sort of stuff more often. So let's jump over to Cursor. So this is Cursor, as you said, it looks like VS Code. It's very similar. I think I'm on the latest version, but I'm definitely on the more recent version where they've sort of streamlined the UI. So you have this chat UI and you have agent, ask, and edit. These are the 3 different modes. And what I like to do is I like to start in the ask mode and plan things out. And then I like to prepare.
So this is like chatting with your code base.
Yes. So in this context, it's indexed everything in my code base. Right now, it's a standard WordPress. So you can see kind of all the different, the plugins and themes and everything. One of the things that's really, I think, actually harder with these tools is it's actually easier to open a plugin you've been working on and get it to improve it. Starting from like line 0 of code on a new plugin is actually a little bit hard because you have to really tell it, hey, go to this place, put the files here. It can go a little crazy. So it's actually a lot easier once you have a plugin going, but we're gonna go from scratch today. So I'm gonna paste in a little bit of directions and talk through them so you don't have to see or hear me typing. But one of the things that I do is I start with a prompt, and what I really want it to do is I want it to just plan, and I don't want it to write any code. I want it to start with planning because I want to review its plans, and then I want to execute on them. So I make sure I'm in the ask mode and not the agent mode because I don't want it to go a little too crazy. And I'm going to paste in. So I'll start by describing what I'm doing. I'm building a WooCommerce plugin that will add a top seller banner above any product with the category music. This should show up on the single product template and on any product query loops. And I'm being very explicit because if I don't say that, it might just show up on, this individual product page, but not on the listing in the shop page. Then I tell it, please write a detailed set of instructions in Markdown for my AI agent to use when building this plugin. And then
this is really interesting, the workflow which you're using. Just pausing it for a moment here.
Yeah.
Generally, people just one-shot prompt, wipe code things, right? Means they just want to get the output, but you are doing something else. So can you generalize your prompt? So
yeah, and so what I find is that especially when you're starting from scratch, you're like, if I'm making a new plugin, it really doesn't have as much context other than just WordPress. So it's kind of like it has everything, and that's too much. It's too much for it to think about. So I want to get
So
really
you're narrowing it
explicit.
down to a
Yeah.
specific set of instructions. So the first part of your prompt is that what you're building, that's the outcome you're expecting. And
Mhm.
then further instructions, and then you're just generating a markdown. Are you also going to push it to cursor rules once it is generated?
I'll show you. So what I'll do, oops, let me get back to my,
Sorry, I'm
so
jumping
I'll
the
keep
gun.
going because there's a little bit more. I put a lot in there. And one of the reasons I get so explicit in my prompts now is because I find that it saves you a lot of time. Another thing I'm going to add is do not include any dependencies and keep everything to one PHP file because I wanted to keep the demo simple. But a lot of times it'll want to get really complicated and do separate files and a composer build process. And I think a lot of times telling it, hey, you can be simple, it's okay. That's what I'll do. And then my last part of my prompt, this is where I add actual explicit docs. So in Cursor, you can have
Nice.
it index different documentation file. So I'll just show you if I hit @ and I start typing in, whoops, docs. What I've done in the past is I've actually given it URLs of all different documentation sources that I might want it to look up. So if I start typing in, make sure I'm in here.
I think the suggestion has a bug. It
Oh
seems
yeah.
object. Yeah, but that's fine. So basically, these are like links to the documentation for
Yeah.
these resources, right? That just links. That's it.
There, exactly. You just tell it, you give it a URL like, hey, this is where the block editor documentation is. So I like to give it specific documentation to link to if I feel like it's needed. In this case, I'll do the WooCommerce ones. Sometimes I'll do, if I'm doing a block, I'll point it to the block editor handbook or something like that. And then the last thing I'll say is do not write any code. So I really don't want it to write code the first time. I just want it to write instructions. And I'll say provide the instructions as a markdown file. Let's hit send. Let's hope it does it. One thing is, I've run this experiment a handful of times. It's going to get it. It's going to never give you the same exact thing. So what it's going to do now is it's going to generate an instructions file that's going to be extremely specific to what I want it to do. And as a developer, then I can look at this and I can say, okay, is there anything in here I want to change or something? And what I do with this is I'll just go to the top. You'll see that it's going to pull out specific links in the documentation that it thinks are helpful. Then it writes this whole kind of instructions specifically for an AI agent. I hit the little copy over here, and then I come over to the notepad and I paste it. So if you haven't used notepads, they're a super cool way for you to store context
How did
about,
you open it, Brian? I missed that.
oh, right here on the side
Oh,
under
right.
your,
Okay. So there is like a collapsible, okay, thing.
yeah, this
Gotcha.
little thing that says notepads. It's basically like a place where you can just store markdown files with context
And
about your
is that
project.
notepad saved along with the workspace or as a separate file?
Yeah, it's saved in Cursor in the workspace, so it doesn't show up in your code repository. I think people in the past were actually making markdown files like in their code, like in their repo somewhere, and then you kind of have to manage that. This just stores it in Cursor for you, so you don't have to deal with it.
Gotcha.
So I won't go through the whole thing, but you can see here, like it tells it make a single file. It's giving it all the descriptions of stuff that it needs.
It's like a proper PID document, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I can go through and just kind of check it if I'm doing, this is a simple task, so I'm not going to read through it. And then that's when I switch to my agent mode. And that's when I tell it, I can actually tell it to look at this notepad. I can give it a name, but I'm not going to. But that's when I can say, build a plugin in the WP content. I like to be really explicit, especially when I'm doing a live demo, which just to make sure, based on, and then I do use that @ symbol, and I just say based on my notepad. So I don't have to tell it anything else because it's going to read this and it's going to follow those instructions.
Boom.
So that's what I like. That's kind of my approach, is where I will do the two-step process of take my prompt, turn it into a way better prompt, then give that prompt to the agent to build it. It'll kind of run in the background while we're talking. And I won't read everything that it says, but it usually gives you some thoughts about different stuff. And then here is my PHP file that it's generated. I'll just accept it, but it does a pretty good job. It does all the proper, plugin headers and stuff like that. It makes a nice class. I can see that it's, using WooCommerce actions and things. It's using things like escape HTML. It's, proper sanitization and stuff like that. It does a
But
pretty good job.
that is something it picked out by itself. Is it a good idea to did you prompt it, by the way?
For
using proper sanitization and things like that?
Yeah. So when it wrote this prompt, it'll say in here, security, it gave it a whole security considerations.
But
And it
was
linked to the
that
docs.
in your original prompt?
No, because I just pointed it to the developer documentation.
Gotcha. And then it
Yeah.
picked it from that. All right.
Yeah.
So that is neat. Yeah.
It's funny too, because I can already see like this time it did it differently than when I tested this morning, like it's using the cache and, a lot of interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Let's
There are infinite ways to solve the problem, right?
I know. Let's just turn it on and make sure it worked. All right. And let's see, plugins. So here's my new plugin, WooCommerce Music Top Seller Banner. It's funny because sometimes it even knows my name and it puts it in there. So it's activated. Let's go back to our shop. And here we go. Top seller on our anything with our music category. So it's here on top of the album, not on top of our beanies. I think there's another down here. There's a music category product. So it's top seller on top of that. If I click into it, it adds it to the top of the template and stuff. And so functional, works. What's really great too is now that you have this and you have the notepad there, you can in the future go through and reference it and say things like, all right, actually make a settings page so I can change the category or I can change the text or anything.
I was actually about to request you to do that. Can we make the music or category thing dynamic so that it's hard-coded right now, right? The music category?
I think sometimes it just does it for you, but no, this time, so it's hard-coded here.
Yeah, okay.
So I can ask, so that's now that I have it and I have this whole documented, now I'll probably just stick in the agent mode and I'll, because once I have the initial plugin, then I don't mind just chatting with the agent and saying things like, I would like to have a settings page to change the category and text of the top seller notice. And usually from there on, it's pretty good because the notepad has links to the docs and has a lot of that contextual information. Is it
a good idea to continuously update the notepad or note while you develop and ask the AI to do that for you?
Yeah, that's a great idea. You could do that. You can, there's a few things. I bet you a lot of people would do that part, even not in Cursor. They might open ChatGPT or Claude and have the notes there and copy back and forth. Like take your notes, copy it into Claude maybe and tell it and have it change it. Or you can do it in the chat here. There's just always the risk of the chat in Cursor. It kind of wants to write code. And sometimes it's harder to get it to do things where you're like, don't write code. Don't give me sample code. Yeah. Don't do it. Just
I know.
Right.
Before you accept this piece of code, while it generated the code, is it already saved in the file? If I go back to my WordPress, is it already there or do I need to accept it first?
No, I believe it's already there. That's a good question. So here we'll see because it'll be, so here's the settings page that it built. So now it gives me all the categories and the text. And so I can change it and say, actually, I want it on my clothing and save the changes. And I don't know what's under. So here's a clothing item.
So now if I go back and reject the change, don't do it. I'm just asking.
Yeah.
If I reject it, then it basically rejects the changes. And then I can redo or undo something else, right? Means I can reprompt for something else. So that gives us a chance, like a diff before you commit, kind of.
Yeah. So you can, so they give you the changes. You'll see the kind of green. If you've ever used something like Git or version control, you can kind of get a sense of Here's all the green is something it added. Sometimes you'll see red chunks for where it deleted some code
Right.
for you to review. You can go step by step, or you can just accept all of it. But yeah, you can remove all of it. I feel like there's one, I don't think it's Cursor. Somebody else might know, but there's one where it does a pretty good job of what a developer would do, which is create separate branches. Like, okay, save this code, but save it over here and don't use it right now. That sort of stuff. I don't remember if it's Cursor, but one of them does that pretty well. So there is some sort of level of version control. You can reject, you can kind of keep talking with it. And then also with your chats, there's a whole history of everything you've done. So you can go back to previous ones and kind of see and re-execute them.
I've also heard from people that AI likes to be atomic. So you do like atomic task of adding, say, settings page, for example, and then you do that atomic subtask or atomic activity, and then accept the change. Now you are safe. Now you keep prompting until you get the next atomic task, and then accept those changes later. So, and then so on and so forth. So is that a right approach, or you have a different one?
Yeah, I personally like to break things down into smaller pieces as much as possible. I think you get better results from it. So if I knew, maybe I would have done the settings page as part of the initial prompt. That's not, I don't think, too crazy of a request to ask it to do. But that said, yeah, if you can break things into steps, you can also ask chat here or chat GPT or Claude to help you break a step thing into steps. You can say, hey, this is what I'm planning, but I want to break it into individual steps, and it'll do that for you. So smaller, concrete, well-described prompts are always going to get you a lot further. And it's sort of that sort of like a preparation, preparation saves you time in the long run.
Awesome. Gotcha. Anything else you would like to show or talk about, Brian, before we move on to the next chapter?
No, I mean, I think that kind of covers everything. The only thing I will say is don't be afraid to also ask it to review your code afterwards. Check for, do you mind checking for security issues? Does this code look safe? Are there performance things I can do? It can also do that sort of stuff. So once the code is generated, don't feel like that's the best code you're going to get. You can very often push it to clean it up and test it for you.
And let's say I have a production site. I want to build plugin for that. So what is the best workflow? Obviously I should not do it on the production side, right? And
yeah,
I like create a copy and then do it on that?
Yeah, definitely. So if you can get a staging site or a local site, that's the best way to go. Depending on who your hosting company is, that stuff's all, they usually have opinions for that. I'm InstaWP, right? You can point it at a live site and make a copy of it to mess around with, right? So
I'm glad that you found my segue and talked about the product. So thanks for the product placement, Brian. And so I think this is a great example of how you can get started with a non-trivial. It is not a very trivial plugin which you built in front of you. And chat, if you have any questions for Brian and Nick, please feel free to post them into the chat. And so let's switch on to the next demo, Brian, real quick, and welcome Nick back. I think Nick had some issue with his sharing of screen, and he's back.
I'm back in working order, I think.
Just fingers were crossed. And now we are back. Great. Awesome. So Nick, what are we seeing today?
All right. So I'm going
to pushing you back to the stage.
Okay.
For a moment. Yeah. Thank you. If you want to be here, I'm not sure. Do you want to be here?
Brian can be here and critique everything
okay.
you're doing.
Yeah, I'm just here to learn from the master.
I should have asked Nick, do you want Brian here or not? Right. So
sure.
Sorry. Go ahead, Nick. I'm interrupted you. Yeah.
So Brian kind of set the stage. I'm going to be using Cursor 2. And so I don't want to rehash everything that Brian covered. But one of the things that you had that notepad. So I just created something called an instructions markdown file, which looks like this. So if you saw Brian's, it's just the same thing as the notepad. But sometimes it takes a lot to write these things out. So I use ChatGPT for that. So I provided it with this very just messy prompt, asking it to help me build an instructions markdown file for Cursor. And what we want to do today is we want to build a custom WordPress block, and the block is going to be like a little notice. So you can have different styles, like a note, a tip, a warning, a caution. You see these on documentation sites and all over the web. But we want to build our own. And so the first part of that is creating that like instructions doc that then Cursor can follow. I always found that if you want to try and build something right the first time, it's worthwhile to kind of spec out what you actually want to build. It also challenges yourself to actually figure out what you actually want to build rather than just diving into the AI. So I asked ChatGPT to write me this little document for speccing out the plugin, and then I made some edits. I also actually asked it to write me a Cursor rules file. So that Cursor rules file kind of is some rules that Cursor will always follow within your project. I asked it to do the same thing. And I kept it very open. I said, something that defines standard WordPress development rules for WordPress block development that uses WP scripts. And so it kind of handled all that for me. Now I made some edits, but let's just take a quick look at those files before we get AI to start building. So this is what I have. I have this instructions.md file. And one of the things that I like to do, this is a personal thing, is I like to do things like tell it my name, tell it the version number I want to start with, provide some context around I want to use WP scripts, which is a package for development, and really kind of break out what my requirements are, what I want the plugin structure to be, some development considerations. This looks like a lot, but if you're using AI over and over again, this is something you probably have saved. You build one, you create an instructions markdown file, you save it. Next time you need to build a block, you make a few modifications. So this is something you can kind of build over time as you're using AI. And similar with Cursor rules.
Nick, just a moment. This file which you have in front of you, this is not the file which you generated from ChatGPT. So this is a generic file which you keep for almost every project.
I did create this one with ChatGPT, but traditionally you would build this over time and then kind of use it from project to project. So if I was going to build a new block, I'd come in here and just change out the name, modify my requirements a little bit. So I did use ChatGPT, but I think that this is something that I have my own personal batch of instructions that I've used in the past, and I'm always kind of modifying those and refining them as I'm starting a new block project.
So this is like an ongoing instruction set, which, okay. And where does the other file go which you generated from ChatGPT?
So I'm going to zoom in a little further. So this is that Cursor rules file. And this is similar to my instructions, but this is some kind of more general stuff, like make sure you're using coding standards. I kind of have my project structure built out. This is something that you would store and have, it's more general information for the AI. And this is something that you kind of copy from project to project. You can think of the instructions as exactly what I want to build. I want to build a notice block and I want it to have these features. Cursor rules are more generic rules about how you want Cursor to behave with regard to.
And these are like very, very specific what you have in front of you. Is this like based on your experience so far with Cursor?
Exactly. So these are things that I have used over time. So for example, for those that are familiar with Webpack, Webpack is a way of how a build process kind of, I'm going to get the terminology wrong, but it compiles or transpiles or compiles your files. I have found that AI loves to build its own custom Webpack files, which often are not needed. So
which are off standard, right? Most of the time.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, don't use this unless you absolutely need to. So these are kind of things that I've run into over time that I want to make sure that, guiding the AI in the right direction.
You know what I would love to do? I would love to copy, if you can, if you are okay with that, put this on GitHub, or you have already on a GitHub repo?
I have
Would
not.
love to share with. Sorry, say that.
It's not currently on GitHub, but I can definitely add it there. That'd be great.
Please do. And Brian, if you have a set of instructions which you follow, please.
And it's also important too, is that, you know, defining the structure, because I find that AI kind of, without giving, you know, clear parameters, it will just create its own file structure. So if you care about how you want your plugin structured, which I do, that's why I'm providing it here. Not necessarily.
Also consistency, right? Every single time.
Absolutely. And WP scripts, which is the package that we're using, kind of has this default. So we want to make sure that we're following that.
So, quickly, what is WP scripts?
WP scripts is a package of scripts. But basically, it enables WordPress development that need build processes. So, like when you're writing a block plugin or anything, you know, using Sass or styles, it allows you to compile those in a nice way, and it really kind of handles a lot of the build process stuff that is kind of challenging to set up on your own. It does it all. I am not speaking very eloquently about what WP Scripts is, but if you go to the developer.wordpress.org documentation.
Yeah, I think we got a gist. Yeah, thank you.
So at this point, I have my cursor rules, I have my instructions. And so at this point, I should be able to kind of, we call it like one-shotting the plugin. So what I'm going to say in my chat here, and I'm just using 3.5. That's what
You are also not a model nerd like Brian?
I'm absolutely not. I'm not smart enough to know what the different models do or keep up with it. So I have been using 3.5 for a long time. And for the sake of not sending this demo off the rails, we're going to keep it with 3.5.
I did try Sonnet 3.7 on their web UI, and the editing, the way it edits code on the fly, it removes code and then adds code in the line while you edit it. And then if there is an error, it can run an agent and check for that error automatically. I think that's the full power of Sonnet 3.7, but that has not been completely utilized by the latest IDE yet. But web UI, yes, 100%, you can do that.
Yeah. It's there's so much stuff you can do, especially with the agent. So I'm not even using the agent. I'm just using the normal edit here.
Okay.
So now I like being nice to my AI. I don't think that actually helps, but we're going to say please and thank you here.
Yeah, so for future purposes.
Exactly. When they take over, you know, we got to be ready.
Quick question. Somebody asked in the chat, I think a while ago, a lot of chat, that is it a good idea to load the entire WordPress installation, but because it will index the entire WordPress, or just the plugin or the block?
Oh, in your project in Cursor.
Yeah.
I always just do the project file. Just do the project folder that you're working from. I haven't tried it the other way, but that's what I always do. Any thoughts,
Brian? You did load the entire WordPress. Does that make a difference?
I've tried to go back and forth to see if I notice. I think the main difference you would get would be, I guess it would probably use a little bit more tokens and slow things down a little bit if you're using the entire WordPress repository. So if you can avoid it, you're probably better off. It's kind of my old habit to just always work from the root of WordPress.
See the whole structure, WP content and everything.
Yeah, and to be able to show, hey, this is where the plugin goes and stuff. Otherwise, you have to make the directory first in your plugins and pull that into Cursor. So I would have had to show opening Finder, make a folder, or you know what I mean, like that kind of thing. So that's the only plus or minus.
That's a very good point. I also imagine, like, if you are building a plugin that, for example, Brian relies on WooCommerce, like having that context in there could be helpful. So.
Gotcha. All right, please continue.
Cool. So I also always like to, before I start, ask it if it has any questions, because
I do that too.
Yeah, sometimes it just goes off. So we're just going to hit this, and all right. So one of the interesting things is that there's an icon library card called Lucide, which I kind of like. And so I've asked it to use icons for that. Actually, before we start, I want to show you what I'm kind of looking for.
What are we building? Yeah.
GitHub has this kind of fun little notice functionality that you can create with Markdown. So this is kind of what we're kind of looking for. We're looking for some little notices that have some icons, and you can put content inside of them. That's kind of what we're going for. All right, so it hasn't built anything yet because I asked it to ask me some questions. So what I'm going to do here, which I think is really fun, is I'm going to take a screenshot of GitHub. We're going to come back over here. Here's a screenshot for reference. This is what I'm looking for. Please start building. All right, so I've pasted the image here. So it has a little bit more context around what I'm going for. It told me that the screenshot helps a lot. I'm not sure if that's true or if it's just...
It's so nice.
And now it's just going to start building. Hopefully.
I always think whether AI actually understands screenshots. It just passes off the text. What is going on there?
Yeah, it's fascinating. It just, the parsing of the images, and it's wild. But you can do that with like ChatGPT, just paste in a random image and be like, what is this? And it just goes, uh-oh, something's happening.
It's taking time, right?
It's working. It's slower than it probably should be, but
it's just, a lot of people using AI.
Yeah, everyone's bogging down the servers
here. Yeah. I think Anthropic's CEO said, I think yesterday or today, that in 12 months, 100% of the code will be written by AI.
It's wild. Now, I want to highlight a few things here. So the first thing is that you'll see this package.json file. So this we built blocks before or built extensions for the editor. You can see that we're heading in the right direction because this packet.json file is saying that, yes, we need our WP WordPress scripts package. So you can kind of start keeping an eye on the AI and make sure it's starting to do the right thing, even if we haven't seen the actual plugin yet. And we have that source folder, and inside the source, we have our block.json file, which you need for blocks.
I wonder why don't we just throw a scaffolded plugin before we actually begin? That will be better or not?
So it's an interesting question. So there is kind of a scaffolding tool called Create Block, which will do basically everything that's happening now for you. I'm a big proponent of Create Block. It's great. I think that it's almost like AI is serving that purpose as well, where it's kind of Create Block. But both methods are great. Now, the benefit of Create Block is you can create pre-built templates for Create Block. So you could have already built out your template. A lot of you see agencies and companies that build a lot of blocks having their own custom templates. So that's still the very valid approach to take.
Gotcha.
This is going remarkably slow.
Yeah. The next thing AI needs to do is to become to become fast.
Yeah.
We don't want to wait so much.
Did it put everything in the index.js? Because I get that a lot, where it just does the whole block in one file.
It always does that. I'm just double checking that it completed everything it wanted to. All right, while it's doing that, I know that it's going to need to install NPM. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this. I'm cheating a little bit, but I know that we need to do this.
But Cursor could have done that, prompted you to do that, right?
It will. Normally, if it wasn't going so slowly, it would say, now you need to run NPM install, and you click a button and it would do that for you. So.
Gotcha.
This is the downfall of live demos, right? Things going slowly, but
I've heard Cursor
That's
this
fine.
week has been pretty slow. There's been a lot of people saying that.
Yeah.
well,
I
installing
guess they
npm
also
takes a bit too, so we'll let them both run at the same time.
With
Yeah.
Cursor, you can point it to your own API keys, right? Like you can, like
Yeah, I
right
think so.
now, you're going through their connection. Has anyone talked about like the pros and cons of that? I know that I feel like I've heard that it's just supposed to be cheaper to just use their default versus paying for it yourself by putting your own API keys in, but that maybe potentially would be a little faster because you're
Uh,
going
I
straight
thought
to
it
the
would be
source.
expensive though. I always thought that.
Yeah, like it's more expensive to do your own because you're paying for
Right.
everything.
Right.
That's interesting. I didn't even know that was an option. It looks
And
like we've completed. So I'm just going to go npm run
Mhm.
start. This will start our build process and generate our build folder. So at this point, we should have a block. So I'm going to come over here to our. There we go. Now this is funny, and I did this when I was testing it earlier. There's a block that exists in the plugin repository called notice block. And so that's why we're seeing this. There's a new version available.
It's the same slab.
With the same slug, exactly. So if I was doing this for production or for my own site, I would pick a unique name, but that's okay for now. We just are not going to hit update.
Yeah. That's all we need to just take care of.
I'll come over here to our post, and then if I type in notice, I see my notice block. That looks pretty good.
Nice.
And I should be, oh, there we go. So now on the sidebar here, I can choose the different colors for, I'm not sure why lightning bolt is the caution symbol. That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
And on the front end, we have this. Oh, there's a little issue here, but
I think, can you type a title on the notice block?
I don't think it has support for a title. We can make this a heading.
Okay, so there you go.
Let's see. I think there might be. All right, so it looks like we have thing.
It would be interesting to screenshot this and give it.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
I think in future it can automatically run this for you and see if everything is okay, and then just continuously build the code for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I didn't do the screenshot.
Yeah, there is always stop.
There we go.
What's nice about a block like this is it's, if you're building sites for other people, this is much more user friendly than like you could do this in the block editor if you're like a block editor wizard and you understand all the intricate groupings and everything, you know what I mean? But like for an end user, like simple, put in the text, pick which style you want, follows the brand guidelines. This kind of stuff is pretty sweet.
Absolutely. And because I mean, that's one of the benefits of block patterns, right? Where this would just be a group and you'd have a border style and you'd use the icon block. I don't know who wrote that. And you'd put it in here and you do the icon and then you'd have your heading and everything. But sometimes having this nice little pre-built container where user can just switch between them is pretty handy. So
yeah, both has its pros and cons, of course.
Absolutely.
While we are waiting for the AI to generate the code, what means a lot of agencies, or did it generate already?
I think
they're still working on it, right? Can we check?
There we go. It all went away.
Awesome.
No longer have a little carrot.
Awesome. So, and that is our notice block demo. Yeah. Is there anything else you would like to cover in that, Nick?
So if I was building this, this is not exactly what I would want. For example, this kind of space at the top isn't perfect. Maybe I don't want the lightning bolt for caution. So this is something that I would do is you basically, I know we ran into the slowness of the AI, but normally it would run a lot faster. And this took all of about 10, 15 minutes to basically scaffold. Now I have a block that is fully functional. It's doing what I want. And this is where you get to refine. And I think that this is where I want to stress, and I'd love to hear Brian's thoughts on this as well. You can't rely on you shouldn't necessarily rely on AI for everything, but it is an exceptional tool for getting you really far. Like if I did this manually, if I wrote all of this code manually and set up this whole thing manually, it would take me a while. I mean, there's just a lot of writing. But now 100%. I can come in here, make some subtle modifications, make some style tweaks where I want them. I can even ask AI to do a few things for me. But I basically have scaffolded this entire block that I can now really fine tune and polish. That's kind of how I use AI when I'm starting a project like this.
And what is the right method to distribute it? Let's say I want to distribute it. WordPress repository might not be the right choice in some cases when it is like a single use one shot plugin. So is it like to upload to a GitHub repo, and what will be recommend?
Yeah, that's what I always do. I have all my random plugins all in GitHub that then I reference. Now, I'm not trying to do a product plug here, but you can use something like GitHub deployments that a lot of hosts have, WordPress.com included, to deploy those to sites. There's a lot of
plus InstaWP.
As an InstaWP. And so it's there's a lot of different tools out there to deploy from GitHub. I think that GitHub is a very convenient place to store your code.
So this is what I've seen in the ecosystem, that 50% of the people they don't even use version control. And the best thing about version control, especially in the AI world, as you said, is you are developing a notice block or whatever block in your local, and then you push it to GitHub, and then it automatically deploys to your staging or production. I think that's a powerful tool to have, especially in the AI era. If you have not used it before, a lot of people use SFTP or just like do something else, which may not be very maintainable. So this is the thing, folks. Please start using it. Yeah.
And I just want to stress too that there's also like an open source benefit to it. Yeah, you can keep your GitHub repository private, but so many of I keep most of my stuff public, almost all of it. And so many times I've written some random block or random something for myself. Someone else has found it and used it and found a problem with it or requested an enhancement. And it just makes your code better, like getting more people to look at it, see it. So highly encourage using GitHub.
Open source on steroids, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, there's another piece to that too, which is with version control is really good at, the whole purpose of it is so you can collaborate with other people. And when this came up on a podcast recently where if you're collaborating with AI, that's another developer. It's not just you, it's you and somebody else with its own sort of intentions. And so once you're getting to more complicated things and you're ready to level up to version control, you'll find that it helps you collaborate with AI in a way where you can, try things, go down a really long rabbit hole and come all the way back to where you started. It's basically like you now have two programmers collaborating at once.
Absolutely.
And when multiple agents will run, one will be doing QA, another will be coding for you, another will be distributing for you, marketing for you. So that will be something to see. Have you guys played around with MCP a bit before?
What was it?
MCPs. Have you guys? Brian?
Sure. I'll talk to it for a little bit. It seems like a thing that came out of nowhere, is a lot of push for it to be some sort of a standard, and maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I think it's going to take a lot of these different experiments of, right now it's kind of Wild West in terms of AI, in terms of how it integrates with information and stuff. The idea that we're going to build one abstraction that a lot of other AIs can use, and it could be like a sort of central, controller for a lot of that stuff, I think will sound interesting. Although I will say that is a common developer mindset, which is I'm going to make an abstraction that everyone's going to use. And there's like the classic, what's the XKCD comic where there's 15 different, frameworks, and the person says, I'm making the best framework ever, and now it's just 16 frameworks. I think MCP is kind of going to be like that, where it's one, there's other ones. I think people are going to do it. And I think what AI should hopefully allow us to do is, I think, start leapfrogging a lot of these ideas that we even need abstractions like this, because AI has gotten so good at taking stuff that's just wild and unstructured and structuring it for you, that I'm not even convinced that, but all these things we learn from them. So if MCP sounds interesting to you, there are some experiments. I know James at Automattic did one for Woo. I think he made a little.
Yeah, we are
MCP.
meaning to invite him on a webinar to do the MCP thing, where basically the plugin which you built. Sorry to cut you off, Prime. So the plugin which you build can essentially talk to a WooCommerce site and make sure that it is working in some way, right? In some fashion. So,
yeah. So he's a good person to ask about that.
Yeah, would love to have you as well on a follow-up webinar along with James. I'm so sorry, Nick. I basically removed your desktop.
No,
are you done with the demo?
No, I'm done with the demo, and I'm just reading up on MCPs, as you can see here.
I'm going to remove your screen sharing then.
Perfect.
All right. So I think we had a great session today. And so we learned how to, I think personally what I learned is how can we use the chat mode and then build instructions and then build the plugin instead of just start implementing things right away. Mm-hmm. This also, I think, the software engineering itself has this problem from the beginning. It's not about AI who is coding for you. It's how you plan for software, right? A lot of people just go and then build the software. And at the end of the day, then that means it becomes unstructured, and then it becomes, you remember that photo of like a tree, and then at the end of the day, the tree becomes something else, right? So client explains something, and then the output is something else. So yeah, so I have some follow-up questions. I think I hope a lot of people learned a lot of things from today's session. A lot of people are chatting about it. I think Victor also adds value add that use PHP-CS code review if you want to push to GitHub. You can use GitHub Actions, so it automatically runs and then reviews your code, yada, yada. And so I think that's a great suggestion. All right. So some follow-up questions before we wrap it up today. I know a lot of agencies and freelancers want to adopt this AI workflow, and they haven't done it yet. What will be the easiest way to do it without like a steep learning curve? I saw in the chat that a lot of people are asking, what is a cursor, and means how do I download it? So that means that a lot of people don't even know about it. What will be the next step one should do?
Do you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
Well, I think that sometimes it's hard to, like, we built new plugins here, right? And sometimes it's hard to come up with ideas. So what I would recommend is take a code base you already have and load it into, download the free version of Cursor. You don't have to pay for the paid version yet. Load it up into Cursor and just start asking Cursor questions about your code base. I found this really helpful. Like, I'm terrible at always writing inline comments for my code. So one of the first things I did when I was learning Cursor, loaded up a plugin that I'd already written by hand and said, how can I optimize this? And it would provide me some feedback. And hey, can you write me some inline comments? Something like that, because you're already working off a code base you really know well because you wrote it yourself. You can start to kind of understand how the AI is interacting with your code base and how it's making changes. Sometimes when you're building something from scratch, the AI is building from scratch, it's hard to understand what's going on because there's so much stuff happening. So I would just recommend starting with a code base that you already have and just start interacting with the AI about that code.
Awesome. That's a great suggestion. Ben, you want to add to something to that?
Sure. Yeah, I would say if even that sounds too intense for you, what worked for me to get into AI was to just start with one of the like consumer products like the ChatGPT app or something like that. And when you're about to sit down to do really anything in your work, talk to it first and just say, hey, this is what I'm doing today. do you see places for this to be optimized by AI or something like that? And a lot of times, this is a thing I do every day. It takes me 2 hours. Can I optimize this? And I just use it to brainstorm through ideas, and it'll get pretty good. Because if you're staring at that blank page of like, I want to use it, I just don't know where. It's really like the best tool to help you learn how to use itself. So that's another place where I start just asking it questions about whatever I'm trying to do, and it usually gives us good answers.
Awesome. So people actually, when they start building with AI, there may be people who are not well versed with coding yet. They will be learning over the time. But what are some of the common pitfalls to avoid? Or I think the great suggestion which you did early on is use instructions fine. I think Nick and Brian, we can use security considerations, your performance considerations to build the code, right? So, but in general, what will be like a common tips or pitfalls to avoid when you're starting with AI coding?
Yeah, I think that taking on too much before you're very familiar with AI, like you're not going to be able to build WooCommerce with AI, right? I mean, I think it's really important to kind of start in a manageable project, like like the notice block is there's a lot of pieces to it, but it's quite simple, right? And so if you don't know how to build a block at all, like by hand, but you want to start using AI, pick something that is very small and then use the AI to also teach you about block development. So you probably don't know all the things that I added to my instructions document because I knew it because I built blocks by hand. So I knew to, don't build custom Webpack, files. Those are something you probably don't know, but you can start by just having it build a block for you. It might run into some problems, but one thing that is like the superpower of AI is just like highlight code that it wrote and be like, what is this? Explain this to me. How does this work? I'm always talking with AI, especially if I'm asking it to build something more complicated. AI is here to not only build the code, but also help inform me about what it's building.
Yeah, and
That's a great suggestion.
If you're unsure about AI, I would even say don't build anything you don't already know how to build first, because using AI is its own skill set that you have to learn. I think that's the hardest part is like Nick and I know now, oh, we have to make these prompts. We have to be extremely explicit. We have to tell it what not to do. But that's a thing we learned through experience. And I think if you start with a thing where you say, I know how to do this, but it's going to take me an hour, but I can very confidently say at the end of it, is AI doing it right or wrong? And I'm just going to work on my AI skills to get it done. Then move on to, all right, now build something that I don't know how, teach me how, and that sort of thing. And just get those AI skills down in a more contained, safe environment.
Yeah.
That's a great suggestion, guys. So I do have just one last question. We already are beyond the 1 hour mark, and a lot of people are already watching us. Before I ask that question, I have a small product plug. It will take almost like 90 seconds. Let me just share my screen real quick. I think I have a screen. So when you are building with AI, you can use InstaWP along with a lot of tools out there. I think we can use WordPress Studio, local WP, and others for the local development. But if you don't want to install something, you can go to InstaWP, go to the staging tab, create a site, and then you can click on the code editor. You can hover over the website name and click on the code editor to get the code editor. So we support VS Code extension. We have extension in the marketplace, and then we also support a web editor. This is where you can start as a beginner if you want to start as a beginner. And you can go to the WP content plugin folder, and then create a myplugin.php and start there. I think Brian made a great suggestion that you can use just like a simple chat GPT or cloud free version to generate your first plugin, put it in there, and then see what happens, right? And this is all online. This is sandboxed. Nothing will happen to the website. If it does, just scratch it and start again. So that's the easiest way to do it. Another thing is the InstaWP extension. You can install it in Cursor or VS Code, and then start building it. Basically, you can remotely edit your files using this extension. So we have documentation on how to do that. Second thing which I wanted to just talk about is you can save this file as a template. And once the template is ready, you can give this link to anybody. This needs to be a shared template. And if I copy this link and paste it, this becomes like a demo of your plugin, right? So anybody can try the demo of your plugin. This becomes like a plugin, demoable plugin, right? So if I click and open launch, it creates a clone of your website as a separate clonable site. And then in that site, your plugin is already going to be there. So in that way, you are essentially able to demo your work. So that was a small product placement. I hope you guys don't mind them for that.
Very cool.
The last thing I wanted to know, what are you building right now using AI? Brian, you want to go?
Man, I'm I'm all over the place, but I've been using it for everything.
Which you can share, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I just did a video last week where I was messing around with like making not like this, but a WooCommerce settings page, but they actually have some frameworks for doing it with like React. So it's a more of an interactive settings page. I used Felix. Felix Arns at Google has this great framework for if you want to actually build WordPress plugins that use AI in the UI, like you want to make a block that has, connects to somebody's AI account and stuff. So I was messing around with that. So that is on GitHub and on YouTube, but it's pretty cool to be able to build a tool that uses AI, using AI to build it. It's getting a little bit messing with my head, but yeah, that was a
It's Inception. Yeah, Inception.
Yes, it is.
I would like to also invite Felix in the next webinar to talk about the AI services. We already are in touch with him. I think it's a great plugin. Nick, you want to share what you're working on?
Yeah, so mine's a little bit more personal. I think I alluded to this earlier, but I'm working on updating my site, and I just kind of took the challenge of basically every plugin on the site. I wanted to take the challenge of building it myself, aside from like a big plugin like Jetpack. So syntax highlighter, I wrote a custom one. Notice block, I wrote a custom one. There's 100 other little things. I had a custom post type for, recording all the times I, and presenting on things like this, all custom, all written by AI. So I'm really kind of trying to take that bespoke plugin mindset to heart and try to build everything that I want in a way that's very specific to me. And it's been a really interesting exercise. And I think that that's a direction for a lot of minor functionality will live in one bespoke plugins that are for one need. So.
Awesome. All right. So with that, I think we are at the end of our webinar, and I would like to thank both of you for your time today. And I would love to have like a follow-up webinar where we can dive deep into more AI stuff. I think people would love to know about it. There are so many things we could not cover today. There are so many aspects of AI which goes beyond just the development, with the content generation, with page generation and design and so much. So more for later. So, all right. Thanks, Brian and Nick. Thank you, both of you today, and have a great day ahead.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everybody at the stream watching us. Thanks for your time today. Bye-bye. Take care.